record actually.
We are now recording.
Can people see my screen?
Yes.
I can.
Okay. So I'm going to go back over this slide, and between yesterday and today, I added some diagrams to explain these because I would like some opinions on this one here. And there was a part 2 of this slide, and so there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 slides. The original 2, and then 4 diagrams that just expand on 2, 3, and 4 in case you didn't understand those. And so I'll kind of walk through this one. So this is issue 43 that originally was filed by Hannes, and he's not here yet, but at least the rest of us can talk about the different options. I think Hannes raised the question, had a couple of options, and I'd like to discuss them. And so I'm going to go back over these, but I'm going to do so one slide at a time and explain what I go through in a particular example. So let me go into full screen here. So you don't have to squint. All right. So here's the example. Okay, and then I'll walk through a slide on option 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the example case that we're going to walk through is where you have an untrusted app that has a dependency on trusted app A. Okay, that trusted app A comes from TAM A, and say in the untrusted apps manifest that has the TA A's identifier and the TAM A's URI. Okay, now internally, that is expressed in a suit manifest, and that suit manifest depends on a different trusted component, meaning a different suit manifest. That different suit manifest, in this example, is hosted by TAM B. Okay, this might be, for example, because TAM B is the TA developer, and the trusted component B might have, say, a personalization data that contains a private key necessary to decrypt A. That would be an example. Okay, and so that's why. In the architecture document and previous discussions, we've said these two things can be from 2 different TAMs. And so here, the suit manifest for A depends on the suit manifest for B. Okay, so that's the example that we're going to walk through 4 different potential approaches that we could take, although 1 and 2 are very similar. Okay, so option 1 works as follows, right? The agent sends out a query request, and just as a reminder, the query request happens by the agent opening up an HTTP connection to TAM A that has empty content, and so the first message comes in that HTTP response. That's query request. The agent sends, hey, I need A. Okay. So in this example, either here or maybe a priori, TAM A would have to reach out to TAM B and go and fetch or download the content that's the bundle with the suit manifest for bundle B. Okay. And so what protocol is this? That's why it's a dashed line here. It's not necessarily the TEEP protocol. Maybe it's HTTPS or something. But the question is, well, what if TAM B only wants to release that to an authorized entity that it tests? And so that's a whole bunch of extra work that would be necessary there. And so that one's very complicated. It might be doable, but it's very complicated. Okay, to try to figure out what this fetch B thing is. But if in theory you could get B, then what happens is A would send install with both suit manifests in there, and the agent installs them both and sends back a success in the success case. So here the difficulty is, what is this fetch B thing, especially when B needs the courier to attest? And in this case, part of the point is TAM A is not trusted by either for the content of B. And so how do we solve that? Complicated, but potentially doable if you want to do a bunch of work. Okay, so that's option 1. Option 2 is very similar. The only difference in option 2 is that the install messages are on 2 different messages, right? And so you install each dependency, success, and then finally you install the dependent A. But otherwise, it's the same thing. Okay. Option number 3 works like this. Okay, here, so remember here, the dependency resolution in 1 and 2 is done by the TAM A. In other words, it has to fetch all the dependencies so it can push all the installs down. So the agent is only talking to the top level TAM, the one that actually that the UA actually depends on. Okay. Unlike those, option 3 puts the dependency resolution inside the agent. Okay. So my understanding is the suit manifest actually allows this, and that's why this one is my preferred out of the 4. This is the one I like the best. Okay. And this one works as follows, right? Query request, hey, I need A. That part's the same. TAM A just says, okay, here's A. Here's some dangling dependencies. It depends on B, and here's the URI for B, and so that's expressed in the suit manifest. But it has this dependency on this thing that has to be resolved, okay? And so at this point, the agent can't complete that install, right? Because it needs the dependencies before it can install A. but it has the TAM-B's URI because it was in that suit manifest, okay? And so it has to reach out to TAM-B that says, hey, I need to resolve a dependency. TAM-B sends a query request saying, please attest to me. Query response says, hey, I need B. Here's my evidence. B says, great, you're authorized. You can install B. Okay, great, successful. And at this point, the suit manifest processor is done with that particular dependency and then can continue, finish installing A, and send back success A. Okay. And so in this example, yeah, go ahead.
So how does the agent know that it needs to go to TAM-B? So in your messaging here?
Yeah, in the suit manifest for A, the suit manifest for A identifies each dependency, just like the UA's manifest identified the dependency for A, and it included the TAM-A's URI. All the information necessary to resolve that dependency would be inside A's suit manifest that comes back in this install.
Okay. And the manifest is sent a query request response?
The manifest is sent inside the install message.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so this install A has the suit manifest for A, which includes, the binary if it's bundled with the manifest. It includes the metadata for A, which includes all the list of dependencies, if any, which in this case would include the information necessary to resolve B. Okay. So here the disadvantage of A is just that there can be a significant delay between the install and the success that's in response to that install. Okay. So in some sense, if the TAM is trying to keep state, then he sends this install and potentially never hears back for a while, right? What if this took a long time to download, or it took a long time to reach, or whatever? There could be a significant delay in between here. Okay. Again, this is still my favorite option out of these, but that is the disadvantage: is you have to deal with this fact that I send an install and don't get back a success until everything is all done. Meaning until the agent is kind of done and knows whether it succeeded or failed, and so there could be a significant delay. So that's the disadvantage here.
Is that actually a disadvantage?
This is
Was that Brendan?
Is that actually a disadvantage though? Because it's not done.
No.
It's not done.
Hannes's opinion, yes. My opinion, no.
Yeah. So the disadvantage comes to the timeout and the amount of caching potential that the TAM. So it gets to the question of the scalability versus latency performance.
When I get to the part 2 slide, you'll see there's another wrinkle that doesn't show up in this particular example. So put that question in the back of your head, because we'll come back to it. But my opinion is no, it's not a problem. So all right, Hank.
So Dave, I suck at note taking. So I was trying to capture the options, and I didn't quite catch the differences between options 1 and 2.
Okay, the short version, the 1-sentence version, is on this slide, which is slide 7 in the proceedings.
Oh, so maybe I don't need to take notes on them.
Option 1 was the only difference was one install message, and option 2 was separate install messages. And I only split those because they came up in the notes on issue number 3, issue 43. If they weren't separated in the issue and comments, I would have combined those into one option.
Oh, can you show me those again? Okay. This is
option
option
back and forth. 1,
1.
2.
Yeah.
1.
But again.
2.
Yep.
Okay. No significant difference as far as the main issue goes.
Well,
when you have the 3 and 4, when you have 3 next page, where you have 4. I
haven't finished with 4 yet. So.
Yeah.
4 gets to what was Hannes's proposal. Okay, something closer to Hannes's proposal here with that delay. I want to say you can see this install kind of has a hanging no response until the end, right? So Hannes proposed, what if you had something else that came back here that indicated, continue or in progress? He described it for a different case than the one that I'm walking through, but in the example that I'm walking through, then you might say, I'm working on it. So it's not a success, it's not an error. We have to define a brand new message for this that says, okay, working on it, just to let you know. And then at the end, you have to send back the success, either unsolicited. By unsolicited, I mean when you first open the HTTP connection, instead of a 0-byte post that gets a query request, it could be a post that just has the success in it, and in that case, it's unsolicited. And this gets into that question with the discussion we were having about token yesterday. because the install echoes back the token in here, the in progress. And so what token to use here? Do you reuse the token or what? So that's some of the complexity there. Or do you generate a new message here? Is this another query response? Do you generate a success to? And so that's the complexity reason that I don't like option number 4, because I don't think the delay is a problem. And trying to define this other message or what you do about those to me is unnecessary complexity. Okay, I'm gonna flip back and forth so people see the difference between 3 and 4 again. Okay, any clarifying questions between those two options?
So, let's go to option 3, right? Let's say, imagine extreme case. Application A depends on not person data, depends on 10 or 100 other TAs.
Yep.
Then this process takes long, right? Do we need to handle that case? It almost put this A dependency, so you finish dependency takes 15 minutes to finish, right? Then you install A to success A will not work. The delay depends.
The same thing then can happen. The same thing then can happen if you have 0 dependencies. If you just have a really complicated install that just takes 15 minutes because you're on a constrained device and you got to do a bunch of operations that depend on maybe resources being available that might take a while to be available and so on. You might need this. You might take 15 minutes even with no dependencies.
So now let's just separate it. Do we treat as let's use HTTP as a practical example right here. So we do even install A and success A, that's 2 HTTP transactions. They're not the same transaction. We talk about here more about session token expiration, right? Not the individual HTTP transaction, right? Because we say queries, but install A it's interesting. It's actually requested. It's always initiated from the agent, right? Agent reach out time A.
Yeah. So for everybody else. For anybody else that's new, each message going to the right is an HTTP post, and each message going to the left is an HTTP response to a post. So there's an invisible post that's right before this query request, so that's the response. And the next HTTP goes from here, and this is the HTTP response. And then there's an invisible empty post here with a message that comes back, and then there's a post here with a response that comes back in the install, a post in the success with a OK. And then another post with a success with an empty response. And so that's how the HTTP messages work.
Right, because these are 2 independent or 2 separate HTTP transactions. And option 3.
So there's no, right, so there is no hanging HTTP.
Right, we need to ensure the token, whatever that session, we have session transaction ID, let's say that way. Install A, expect a token and then transaction ID back, say just that transaction done. As long as that have a longer expiration time window, this can work. It doesn't need to acknowledge it. It doesn't have heartbeat of acknowledgement. Say I'm working on, right? Option 4 is about heartbeat acknowledgement. I'm live, I'm working on. So I think that I tend to not go there. I also favor option 3 over option 4 myself. I don't want to change the protocol here dramatically to add that heartbeat acknowledgement. Yeah.
Right. I'm going to go back just to respond to you to the slide that we had that we covered yesterday, which is this one, which is pending the discussion that we will have in suit at the suit working group. That it is possible that we may not actually need a token for install and delete. And so there may be no need to keep state on the TAM with a token. And so that depends on what the resolution is for suit. So
token, we need to identify. I actually a little bit lost here. Transaction ID or token. We want to be stateless. Like that, stateless means for each transaction, right? But that data is in the payload itself. When we say install TA1A, right, application A, this one identify, this one, that's transaction request. Okay, say.
The identifier is the identifier of which suit manifest you're installing. That's right here, and the response. And this is basically copied out of the install or delete. Well, the install in this example.
But it's not request ID, is it? Right? It's what to install, not to say we.
Yeah.
which transaction.
Right. And so why do I care which transaction it was? I claim that I don't.
What if I say, well, what if that one I have somewhere have a good time, it has 2 commands to install. Somehow in out of order, spam, whatever, say request, it send 2 install command. You need to identify which ones responded.
Yeah. You're never going to have 2 installs for the same suit manifest, or if you do, the second one is a no-op, right? And so the suit digest identifies whether you're installing A or B. You don't need a token to match. The suit digest says, you sent me an install with a suit digest. That's the token. Brendan, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my understanding. So,
Correction needed.
what was that?
That's many phases of my concept was, sorry, Brandon, go ahead.
I said no correction needed. No, the point here is that the suit manifest has a digest. The digest is collision resistant. If you have a collision resistant digest, you have a unique identifier, or a statistically probably unique identifier, and that should be good enough for virtually any purpose.
I thought it was a suit. The manifest file is described with the application itself. It doesn't depend on which transaction, right? That it's unique in that way, but it's not unique based on in the morning send the install command versus afternoon send install command. Those 2 commands should be different. It has its own unique identifier to me. Those are different transactions, right? But I would update.
Sure. So they're
right?
different transactions, yes, but they have the same result. And what you care about in suit is results. So if you send the same command a second time, and you have a dangling reference to the first one that hasn't been closed, and you get a record or a report back that says, I have installed this image, or this manifest. Well, the result of installing this manifest is both of those previous dangling commands can now be closed. It doesn't matter which one induced the completion, because both of them are satisfied.
I am proposing, I'm just going to summarize what Brendan's saying by saying, I would like the TEEP messages to be idempotent.
It should be,
yes, I agree with that one. That statement, it should be idempotent, right?
And because of that, the token shouldn't matter.
Actually, I thought it was because that is the matter, right? So, like first command do, second one may become a even if you install from client, it explained as a reinstall, right? First worked, second install is maybe reinstall, or it is a no-op or decline. So that actually has different interpretation. So I always feel that anytime you do a device update, where application installation should have a unique transaction ID.
So let me ask a question to Brendan. Because the suit manifest defines the update procedure, if I'm using the right term, with a capital U update, capital P, I think it's update procedure. Okay. If you already have a particular suit manifest with a particular digest installed, and you initiate the update procedure a second time, what would you expect the suit reports to contain?
The suit report should contain exactly the same content as if it were installed. Each of the checks will result in the same result. Each of the, you might get a different result code for a fetch. Like it might say, I've already got that, rather than I got that okay. I'm not, so far we have left that as an application or an implementation dependent detail. But it certainly wouldn't give you a failure. It might just give you a different result code. So the result should be either identical or the parts that matter are identical.
And if it is, if the fetch had a different result, wouldn't that be the same as if you pre-cached the binary and with the, in other words, the binary was pointed to by the manifest, but the binary wasn't bundled into the manifest. And if you already had the binary cached locally, wouldn't you get the same result in that case the first time?
Yes.
He's verifying. Okay. So yeah, thank you for verifying my understanding. So my belief then is that the token shouldn't matter. In other words, even if you were to reorder the two and respond with, if you were to flip the successes in the reverse direction and match them with the opposite ones, you'd end up with exactly the same result. The token doesn't matter. Okay, I'm going to flip back to their slide, but this is just where I was pointing to where it is in the SOUP manifest.
So, Dave, do you still want to comment on your questions from about 20 minutes ago? Because I think I forgot most of my answers already now.
Any comments that you still have? Yes, you're next in queue. Go ahead. Anything you still remember, please.
Yeah. There's so much I would like to comment on. I should have made notes. So the delay was a little bit vast, I have to highlight. So first of all, there was this sequencing question. Could you go back to one of the interactions, like option 3, for example? This resolves an interaction between TEM A and TEM B, leaves everything to agent. I still think there might, if you're going with evidence and such, there might still be a relationship between A and B, because I am not entirely, because TEM B now has to understand what is depending on it when there is a request coming, that when this is this thing initiated from agent that is not highlighted here, I think. And then TEM B has to request evidence now, and it doesn't know why. It doesn't know that TEM A has done something and provided probably also attestation requests. TEM B probably could be another entity entirely, no idea what TEM A actually created evidence received for A. And even if TEM B would receive it, it could probably might not have had to discover a verifier to check that evidence, because it's, again, a separate entity somewhere else. So it is surprised by this. Maybe, and why the concatenated thing from option 1 or 2 is somehow mitigating that problem, because TEM A could now provide that information to TEM B. It is actually more fragile, because agent, I think, is chaining, and therefore if TEM A, TEM B stuff fails, how does the agent know about this? That is like TEM A has to inform agent, like, my dependency failed. That is more complicated, more complex. So in this, option 3 and 4 are better, I think. But now the burden of appraisal is somehow weird for TEM B. It doesn't know, I think, what to do here sometimes.
All right. I don't second respond, but I want to make sure you can finish before you forget what else you're going to say. So
no, that's okay. The most important
Gotcha.
thing. The other 3 are gone, I think.
Okay, gotcha. So let me respond to that. So before I get into B for a second, let's talk about TEM A. Okay, so the way that this works is query request would include the challenge. So if you're using nonces, right, then this is where the nonce would appear, and the E would appear in query response. Sorry, I was getting background noise. Was that somebody interrupting?
I think somebody, they muted.
Okay. So I'm going to say what A is, and then I'm going to say how it's the same for B. So in A, the same message that carries the evidence also carries the fact that it's asking for A. But what it does not pass to TEM A in the current protocol is it does not identify which untrusted app is expressing a dependency on A. Okay, it's not something that would normally be in the evidence unless we start specifying it in RATs, and it's not something that's in the TEEP message. So what that means is TEM A is making a decision purely based on the fact that the agent says that it has a need for A, and the TAM can decide whether to grant that request or not, regardless of who's depending on it. Okay, so now let's go to TEM B. Same answer. TEM B, it could have been that the untrusted app had a dependency on B, right? if that was the case, TAM-B wouldn't know which untrusted app, at least in today, and therefore it does not need to know, at least that's the current claim, which the fact that it's A, TAA that depends on B, because it didn't know that an untrusted app would. That's not part of the requirements right now. And so here what happens is that the reaches out to TAM-B, and TAM-B doesn't know why yet, so it sends a query request. What's your state and why are you asking me? Okay, in the response, the agent attests with his evidence and says, and I'm talking to you because I need B apparently, okay? And then TAM-B can decide whether to grant that wish or not. So the point is that TAM-B is doing the same thing as TAM-A, where the thing that you're worried about is not currently a requirement in the protocol. You don't care what the dependent piece is.
Okay, that is what's confusing to me, because the slide literally starts with dependencies and a dependency chain, and then the solution has nothing to do with dependencies at all. So that is something that has to go through.
Yeah, the title is showing what the suit manifests look like, right? And so in this, if we were having this discussion, the suit working group, right? If we said, if you have a reference from one suit manifest to another suit manifest, right, where A depends on B, there's nothing in the manifest for B that identifies A, only the other way around.
Okay. In this case, all the decisions why something is not working in this option 3 or 4 even is better, because the agent has total control about completeness. It might be interesting to have this aliveness feature. I have no strong opinions about it unless if it doesn't scale well. If you do that a lot.
Right. I have two goals that I'm attempting to optimize simultaneously, and maybe at odds sometimes, but I'm hoping not. One is that I would like the agent to be able to scale down to a constrained device. And number two, I would like an ultra scalable TAM that ideally has zero state or as close to zero state as zero state between HTTP requests as possible. Now, that might not be possible, but how close to zero can you get? And then you can make your TAM be ultra scalable.
Okay.
So I have some comments. I guess I should join the queue.
I can't see the queue, so unless Nancy's managing it, just speak. So
No, I mean, remember, nobody's helping take notes, and just realize.
We have a small enough participant list that I'm fine just jumping in unless Nancy wants to start managing.
You guys should just jump in. I'm not. This is a side meeting.
Yeah. So jump in, Brendan.
Go away.
Okay.
Go. Yeah.
So if we go back to option 2 for a moment.
No, not go away. Go, Brendan.
2 for a moment. Yeah. Okay. So option 2 is an interesting one. I think we could make it work. If this is what you want, if this is desirable, then the only thing I see here that's even remotely problematic is that TAM-A might lie and provide an old version of B that it fetched at some previous time. But that sounds like something that's very easy to overcome.
Yeah, that's not the only problem. That is one problem. I believe that this one would be solvable if we wanted to go here. It's just a bunch of work. So the bigger
I don't think it is a bunch of work.
The bigger question to me is if TAM-B's policy is that I will only give out the B suit manifest to somebody who attests to me that I trust that they're running inside the right TEE. Okay.
Right. So you can deal with that by forwarding the evidence on from the agent. If TAM-A forwards the evidence from the agent on to TAM-B,
it's not that easy. No. The evidence itself, if you inside the RATS architecture, you have to ensure that that evidence is fresh. Okay, so the notion of the challenge is to say, if you're using nonces, which is the way that EATs were first defined, it might not be the only option, but nonces is like the thing that we usually talk about, then the evidence has to sign the nonce provided by the thing that wants to receive the evidence. And so that means you can't just forward on the evidence used for A, because that would use A's nonce, and you need the one signed with B's nonce.
okay. There's probably a way around that. In fact, I'm convinced there's a fairly clean way around that, but it starts invoking trusted timestamp servers.
There are three options in the RATS architecture. One is nonces. Okay. which requires an extra round trip to go and fetch the nonce. But hey, you know, the TEEP protocol has this query request step, which kind of has that extra thing, which I would like to get rid of in cases where you don't need it. The second option is synchronized clocks, and so that one requires timestamps, but it requires that you have a clock and that that's actually synchronized with a trusted time source. So that's the hurdle there. And the third one is something that is using handles that requires both of them have the same epoch number, that they get the same epoch thing from some trusted handle distribution server. Okay, that one is actually doable and can potentially be used to solve this as long as all of them have the same handle distributor. I saw Hank nod once, and so I don't know if he has any comments on that. But I agree with you, Brendan. This one is solvable. It's just work to solve it. I don't know if there's sufficient reason to do the work to solve it, or if we should just say we're going to specify option 3.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I can add to this that both solutions, synchronization of clocks or distribution of handles, requires extra effort. It's as easy as that. And so there might be scenarios where this is unavoidable, but then architectural-wise, it's also doable. The evidence conveyed can change. Appraisal of evidence is not defined here, so you can add that on. But without it, you cannot do this fair relaying of evidence by still claiming it's fresh.
So you do have one more option, and that is the trusted timestamp server, right? The trusted timestamp server puts an additional piece of effort in that the agent has to get its evidence timestamped. The rest of it falls away. The rest of it's fine.
That is a handle distribution thingy. Like it's a hybrid of handle and clock. You can, of course, with every request for evidence, you can on the fly keep a fresh timestamp from a timestamp server. That's how TUDA works effectively, the time-based unidirectional attestation. And then you can relay evidence as long as you will on for the feasibility of the timestamp token. And so that's fine, of course, also. But it's introducing the idea that both TAMs have to have access to the same timestamp server provider, which is a handle provider in the architecture, actually.
Yep. Ming, you were trying to say something.
Yeah, I would like to add a comment. I just say this model was option 3 in general. Favor option 3 for a reason. Think about the chaining dependency, right? If the A depends on B, B depends on C. So if you use option 2, will B collect the C and hand it back to A? Because I don't want to scale. If a later device, the agent handle that, right? It handle dependency, it go to A, go to B, go to C. Depends on that. If you have chain dependency, it can go further.
Well,
So this
great
model
point. I hadn't thought about that.
many manufacturers. Yeah.
I
the
think
chaining will fail. Yeah.
I don't see why. I think any of these options will allow for that chaining. It's just you're just nesting differently.
I agree.
And
in fact,
B2. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I actually agree with that point. And in fact, the thing that I would bring out is that especially when we start invoking things like a constrained device, getting one of the TAMs to do all of the work for the constrained device, and thus cutting down the number of round trips it has to do, cutting down the bandwidth that it consumes, cutting down all of that, even the number of secure sessions it needs to establish, those all save resources, those all cut down what the device actually has to do, and that gets you closer to being scalable, not further.
So I think Ming's point is that if you have a tree of stuff, A depends on B, depends on C, A depends on D, if they involve different TAMs, that means you have to go out and collect all of the nonces and stuff, send them down to the agent. So you now have a whole bunch of nonces you need to include either in your evidence or evidence sets somehow to be able to pass back. That's the complexity. Is it solvable? Yes, if we wanted to do the work, but I don't know that it's important work to do. So.
No, indeed, and that's where the question of unidirectional attestation probably makes more sense.
I'll add another comment, if I may. Say, for constrained devices, we may not have this kind of complexity that manifestation to open maybe, right? So constraint devices that application may not be that too heavy, I would say. Number station need to go out. Hopefully that's it's not common. So that's
Okay, so
help, right? So you
option 2 is the one that Hannes originally put into the issue that he filed. So I think this is what he was thinking when he filed the issue before we had the discussion. And so since he's not on here, I'm just saying.
Oh, he was.
He's on. He is
Welcome.
very descriptively
Okay.
named
It's
Web Authorization Protocol.
Yeah, yeah, he's.
Okay, so I would like to hear from Hannes since you opened this issue. Do you need me to go back through these, or do you have opinions on them now?
Hannes, you may be on mute.
Nope.
He could be.
No microphone.
No, yeah, it's locally muted, but this WebEx is on.
Oh, yeah.
Let's say I will put in the chat here.
I'm doing
If
it.
you can hear us. Okay, yeah, let it do it. So, yeah, okay, good. Thank you. Russ asked Web boss, like, can you hear us?
Well, just like I'm the rats working group. He's the web.
The entire working group, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are the entire.
Very loud. Okay.
Okay. So I do have one more slide that's a different example, but I don't know if we can go back and forth between these. But if Hannes, you have any comments before I add in the last piece of the question. Did anybody else have something they did not get to say yet on options 1, 2, 3, and 4 before I add in the other piece, meaning same question, different example?
Yeah, I do. Yes. So from the what I learned from the hackathon, option 1 and 2 difference between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 is how much the TEEP message format gets simpler or not, and making the TAM as much as possible as a stateless for then the TEEP message format gets simpler and simpler. So
yeah, wait for the last one too, because your point is actually a nice segue to the other problem.
oh, okay.
Because during the hackathon, I was trying to implement. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Akira, you're saying the messages get simpler as you go from option 1 to option 4?
No, between 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And between 3 and 4.
Oh, got it.
So 3 and 4 is it gets simpler. Yes.
So I'd like to show the other example then, unless Hannes can speak, because you'll see there's another dimension that makes things complicated as well. So here's the other case. Okay, remember this case was I have a UA that depends on A that depends on B. Okay, different case starting from the UA. In this case, I have an untrusted app that's going to be updated. So it's already installed, and previously had a dependency on TA1. Okay, sorry, I was using A and B. Now I'm using 1 and 2. Yeah, sorry. So untrusted app depended on TA1. New version of of the untrusted app comes down. This one now depends on TA2 instead. Okay, so maybe I switched out a crypto library and I'm now using a different TA implementation of that crypto library or something like that. Okay, so I want to remove the dependency on the old TA and add a dependency on the other one. Okay, so that's what happens on the untrusted apps updater. Okay. And now, furthermore, assume that space is scarce such that I only have space to install TA2 after TA1 is removed. Okay, that's the example I want to walk you through. Okay, that if I tried to install TA1 first before removing TA2, I'd get out of space. Okay, so what happens here is if I walk through the flow, right, the query response gets, and this, I'm going to use both of these, make these simple and say there's only one TAM here. I could split it into 2 TAMs, but let's combine it into 1 TAM just to keep this one a little bit simpler. So the query response says, hey, I need TA1 and I no longer need TA2. Okay, so the query response has both of those in there. And you say, what does the TAM do now? Okay. I says, because I wanted to try to implement this, and I scratched my head for a while saying, how do I implement this? What do I do in the TAM? Okay. Because what you need to be able to do in order for things to succeed, you need to first send a delete on TA1, and then when that one finishes, then you can install TA2, right? If you do anything else, any other sequence, it won't succeed. Okay. This is the golden path, right? You do the delete. When the success comes, you do the install. So how do you actually do that? So you can say, well, what I want then is I want the delete success response could trigger the install message. You're going to know what is it that triggers the install, because normally so far we've only talked about an install being triggered by a query response. Okay, and so how do I do that? Does that mean that so there's the different possibilities, right? It says what do I trigger? What triggers this install message, right? Because the query response said I needed TA2, but I only sent a delete message. I couldn't send the install then. I had to wait for the delete to finish. So what triggers the install is the question. Okay, now think about what happens if the so what happens if the success message is lost for some reason? It times out because there was some connectivity glitch or something, so it couldn't contact the TAM. And maybe something happens with another thread or whatever, that there actually is another query response. Was there a race condition or what? How do we resolve that? Or what's the right way to specify the TAM behavior? So here's 4 options there. One thing we could do is to make the problem go away by combining install and delete into one message. And so instead of having to serialize these, just going back here, remember back here in option 1, we can pass multiple soup manifests and install. So this install A plus B is the same as 2 separate messages. And for the delete and install, they're 2 separate messages. So we could have a message that does install A, delete, install B, delete A in one message, right? So that's what option 1 is, and which would change the message structure to combine both of the fields in the install and the delete into one message to be an install or delete message. Okay, that would be option 1. Okay, then you can do it in one round trip and not have to wait and keep state and remember, oh, I'm waiting around to install this TA2, and so I have to remember that he's asked for TA2 and so on. So that would be option 1. Option 2 is to say, well, I never have to remember anything. I only trigger the install or the delete in response to a query response, right? And so then the query response comes in, I see a delete and an install request, and sorry, I ignored the install, I sent a delete. Next time around, he has to connect to me. I generate a brand new query request. He sends a query response saying, I need to install TA2 still. And you say, great, now I can install TA2, okay? And so that one, the success doesn't trigger anything. I have to cause the agent to generate another query response in order to trigger the rest of the flow. That would be option 2. Okay. Option 3 is to say the success and the query response get to be combined into one message. So my query response can say, and I now need TA2. And so we would combine the fields in success and query response into one message, similar to option number 1. So this one, there's still 2 round trips. So the analogy here is delete A. Let's say here, delete A, success and query response, and install the other one in success, right? I didn't draw the picture here. Option number 4 is to allow the install and delete to be triggered either by reception of a success or reception of a query response. But this one has a bunch of extra complexity because the success is giving you the deltas on the state. Like I just finished installing one thing, but I'm not retelling you what I still need or what I don't need. And the query response is the full state. And so now I have to deal with being able to parse both deltas and full state and deal with that in my state machine. And so this one, in my opinion, is the most complex. Out of these, my preference would be option number 1, only because to Brendan or whoever's point, this one reduces the bandwidth in constrained devices by getting things down into fewer round trips. That's option number 1. It's the only one that has that has not an extra round trip. All 2, 3, and 4 all have the extra round trip. And so option number 1 would be the most friendly for a constrained device in terms of bandwidth and latency.
Dave, this is Hannes. I don't know if you can hear me.
Go ahead.
Like I missed the initial part of the discussion, but leveling up to where we came from and what we discussed on the GitHub issue, I think the difference between your view and my view was you basically argued that the TAM should do all the config resolution and then it just pushes things down.
No,
to the device?
opposite. I'm arguing that only the agent does dependency resolution. That's option 3, right? Option 3 is the one that is my proposal, that only the agent does resolution. The TAM never does dependency resolution in this example.
Oh, okay. Then I completely misunderstood you, because you said that as these additional messages which I had introduced, like in I think this continued or something is not needed. But I think then we're on the same page anyway already on that. And the question is, what you are looking at here is, what's the best way to implement it then?
Yeah, option number 3, before you got on, I was explaining there's no continue here. There's only a continue in option number 4, the continue or in progress or something. Option number 3 has no new messages. And all the dependency resolution is on the client, meaning the agent. And this is the one that is my preferred approach. The disadvantage on this one is that the TAM sends an install, and it may be a long time before he gets the success message for A, because the dependency resolution has to happen in the meantime. But my belief is this is the normal suit manifest processor's dependency resolution thing that's consistent with the suit spec.
But for example, here in this exchange, the client with the install, the client gets the DA and then suddenly figures out that, oh, it needs some personalization data from TAMP, let's say. But it has no way to send that message to TAMP. It basically has to wait till it gets by magic. Or is that the message that is kind of hidden here?
Yeah, sorry, I walked through this before you got on, so I'll briefly do the same thing. But this is showing us the TEEP messages. The HTTP messages, if you remember, there's never a line going to the left without a line going to the right. That's a 0-byte post. And so the query request is a response. And so what happens here is in the suit manifest of A, it identifies the dependency, which in this case, it depends on suit manifest B, which is reachable via TAM B. And so what happens is he has to open the 0-byte post off the TAM B, saying, I need to contact you. TAM B then responds to the TEEP query request saying, why are you talking to me? And then he says, here's my evidence, and I now need B, and the flow continues. And so the invisible one is that 0-byte post.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so this was saying my preference is for option number 3, although the other ones could work with effort. Okay, but option number 3, my belief is that this is the simplest. But this is still a case which is only doing install. So the other variation is when you have a delete and install, whether they're 2 different TAMs or the same TAM. And in the case where they're the same TAM, this is why I argued that if you want the TAM to be as stateless as possible, then either option 1 or option 3, where option 1 is the simplest one, is the one that allows the TAM to be the most scalable, as well as providing the fastest latency and bandwidth reduction in option number 1.
Okay.
But this one does require a message format change, because we take 2 messages and combine them into 1 message and take the different fields and say they're just optional. You can have installs and or deletes in the same message.
But probably not a big drama.
That's my belief. And so here, because I was trying to implement this during the hackathon, I was working on the delete behavior, right? And I came into this case here in my implementation saying, I don't know what to do if I get both of them. And so I didn't implement the case of what happens when I ask for both of them, because I kind of stopped here and said, file issue, and we'll discuss first before I go into implementation.
Makes sense, yeah.
And so, because if they would have been combined into 1 message, I could just do it all in 1 pass. I don't have to keep any state, query response, generate stuff, send the install / delete, flush all state, I'm done, wait for the next time that he connects. And so option number 1 would be the simplest for the TAM.
Yeah, the reason I think why we had this install delete as separate messages was related to the earlier debate about the security domains, where creating a security domain was more, had these separate sort of additional payloads, and now the delete didn't. So I don't,
But now we move that into the suit manifest, and so that means the TEEP protocol is simpler now. So I think you're right. The original reason they were split no longer applies.
Yeah.
So other implementers, Akira, Asobe-san, do you have any thoughts on this? Would you be okay combining install and delete into a common message? Other implementers?
Yeah, 1 and 3 is it's the same as TAM is going to be a stateless, or agent going to keep the tracking. So yes, 1 is fine.
So 3 keeps it stateless but has the extra round trip.
Yes,
1 gets rid of the extra round trip.
Yes. And for the TEEP message format, combining install and delete doesn't look.
Yeah. The response to both of them is identical. That's the success or error message. And so you're going to do the same kind of response to both messages anyway. And so one of them has a list of suit manifests, and the other one has a list of component IDs to delete. And so we just put your installer delete message has a list of 0 or more suit manifests and a list of 0 or more component IDs to delete. Okay, I see Hannes prefers 1 and Asobe-san prefers 3. So Asobe-san, can you say why you prefer 3? Yes, agree with Hannes, but I don't know the suit. I'm looking for, if there's a technical reason to prefer 3, I'd like to hear it, because I can't think of a technical reason that 3 is better than 1. Because otherwise, I'm going to generate a pull request that does option 1 on this screen and option 3 on this one, because that's my preferences here. But if somebody can give me technical reasons why something else is better, happy to listen.
I might have a comment on combination of content or messages. Basically, you are you're not actually combining the operations. You are concatenating them in a single message. So
Correct.
that could be a general structure, because it could, in theory, then facilitate 1 or 3 both. I don't know. I'm just asking. Sorry.
I was going to ask the same thing. I see them as being separate, and so you could do both.
What is the reason for a single post request per command or per request?
So Hannes highlighted less.
I want to respond to Nancy, and then I didn't understand your question, Brandon. In option number 1, this combines 2 messages that are going from the TAM to the agent. Option number 3 combines 2 messages from the agent to the TAM. They're actually 2 independent things, right? Doing one change doesn't do the other one.
Correct. And that's why I was saying, I guess I wasn't seeing them as 1 or 3. You could do both.
Yeah. I don't know of a reason to do 3 is my question, but sorry. We can go on to your question now.
Yeah.
I'm just asking if there is a specific serialization reason or something else that has induced the pattern of sending only a single TEEP message per request or response.
When you say, I'm trying to parse your words here and translate them into TEEP protocol terms, do you mean only sending one response, one TEEP response in response to a TEEP request, or are you asking about something at the HTTP layer? That's what I'm not understanding. Which question?
I'm asking about the intersection of TEEP and HTTP. Is there a reason to send only a single TEEP message, be it request or response, in any given HTTP message?
Thank you. I understand your question now. No. Other than what the transport spec says right now, but there's no inherent principle behind that that says that that's a requirement.
And if you remove
right now it is 0 or 1, and if you want it to be 0, 1, or more, that would be possible if there's a good reason for it. Yeah.
If you made that change, then you instantly get 1 and 3.
I'm thinking about that. That's an interesting observation.
And I have a comment here. I mean, so I see this as a slow slope here where we combine. I understand optimization. Yeah, I want to see this one. Let's give an extended example here. I depend on application tier 1, but now referred by tier 2 and tier 3. Right, again, I go to plurals of TS. So now we optimize it by option 1. You have insert delete one message. So it's a delete tier 1, but install on tier 2, not tier 3. So which the tier 3 will hang out, right? So which one pick? So that the brand equation makes sense. Do we support a batch? Yeah. If
today, an install is a batch and a delete is a batch today.
Right. So now they say, right, I talk about a case here, is right. You install delete tier 1, but then you install tier 2 and tier 3. The option 1 approach, we merge into one message. What does that mean? That means delete tier 1, install both tier 2 and tier 3 in one message?
Correct.
As a batch message.
Correct. Today, you can install TA2 and 3 in the same message, and you can delete TA1 in a single message. Or you can even delete 5 TAs in one message, and you can install 5 TAs in one message. But what you can't do is you can't delete one or more and install one or more in the same message.
We're doing mixed operations. We just said today, so one operation type by each message.
Yeah, so here, if we were to combine them, and I'm going to compare it with Brendan's suggestion, which I hadn't thought about before. If you combine them into one message, then the behavior is you do all the deletes before the installs. Okay, you just process all the deletes, you process all the installs, then you're done with the message, and you send back your error or success with the suite reports. If you split them into multiple messages, you could have done that. Let me go back to say this message here with install A, comma B. If you took Brendan's approach, you wouldn't need to have done this. You could have done another variation that would be semantically the same, would be install A and install B as 2 different TEEP messages in the same HTTP response, right? That would be equivalent in Brendan's example. Yes. So I think the only difference is better CBOR compression, but semantically it's identical. But I think, like I said, I think the only difference is just CBOR compression. I think the other possible difference that maybe there's an interesting thing there, I can't think of a case, is if you install A and B, if you're using tokens, which again I'd like to get rid of, then you'd have to have all the answers being the same success message. As opposed to if I said success for A and success for B, I could split those into 2 different messages sent at different times. If we get rid of the token and just use the suit digest, then that difference goes away. And the only difference is the CBOR compression.
What you could do for the success is you open up a CBOR sequence of all the success responses and stream them until they're done, and then you end the RESTful connection.
Yeah, but my example is what happens if success of A and success of B, there's a delay of, say, 3 minutes while you're doing work in between those two, right?
Well, on a RESTful state, it's not a problem.
I don't want to have a hanging HTTP connection that degrades the TAM scalability.
Oh, you're thinking in HTTP. I'm thinking HTTP2 and CoAP, and there that is not an issue. But if you're going with old school HTTP, that will become an issue. Yes.
Yep.
I think for constrained devices, we have to presume conventional HTTP for now.
Well, that argument goes both ways. Some people would argue that for constrained devices, you want to go CoAP, but that's a different argument. It's outside of our working group right now.
Actually, funny enough, because we also discussed this, SIM cards use an HTTPS-based provisioning protocol straight into the SIM card. And SIM cards are not necessarily known for being high-performance devices.
Yep. Okay. Any other thoughts on this? Because otherwise, I'm going to take some direction and do pull requests for people to review. To see if you like my write-up of option 1 on this slide and option 3 back here. because I think that gives the most efficient answers in terms of both CBOR compression, et cetera. So I thought, Brendan, you made me think to see, is there actually an advantage to do that? Because that's not a, your point is correct. I don't know if it buys us anything given that you lose some CBOR compression, but it's.
Would you like a further spanner for your works?
I will accept one. Will I like it? I don't know. But go ahead. What's the spanner?
If you go down the road of sending multiple CBOR messages within a single HTTP request, and you just so happen to pack those in a single CBOR structure, and you look down the road to when packed CBOR is available, your packed CBOR argument goes out the window.
Yeah. Okay, I understand. I think in the past we said we would have to do another version of the protocol if we ever wanted to switch to use packed CBOR, and that might be never. We don't know. So that was the IETF 108 discussion.
Yeah, having seen this progress, it looks likely that this is a useful thing and will happen right now. I'd also say that for the options here, why Brandon's suggestion is a very interesting compromise for meeting in the middle here. I would also like to hear an argument why the mixing of installation operations and deletion operations in general is not allowed. So you could have a single TEEP message, not an HTTP concatenation of TEEP messages. That would allow for all of these, and there might be a reason why you don't do that. And one of the reasons might be the latency of the accumulated batch operation here, which I understand now. But there is a reason why you haven't done this, and you're considering merging install and delete only on the message level and not on the transfer level. And that is, I think, an option that has to be at least spelled out at some point, I think.
So right now, my preference, Brendan, so just thinking about the discussion we had at 108 that I just summarized, you can look in the minutes, but there was a discussion about, I think it was 108, right, where we talked about packed CBOR, 107 or 108, I think it was 108, but some recent IETF TEEP meeting. My preference would be to say, great idea, what if we just punt that to say, at such point in time, if ever, as we take a dependency on packed CBOR, then we do it at that same time, and just go with option one of this slide as being the simplest one for now. That would be my preference, but I don't feel strongly about it. So
the argument I was making, to be clear, was that you take a dependency on packed CBOR, but you simply recognize that if packed CBOR became available, then it would be a relatively low-cost upgrade to cut the bandwidth costs.
Yeah, I understand. I guess partly my preference has to do with the transport spec as currently specified. It has multiple interoperable implementations right now. And number one does not require any changes to that. And your idea would require changes to the transport spec and the implementations and get roughly the same behavior and maybe some additional advantages that you're pointing out. But I don't know if the advantages are worth having to change the spec and the implementations if the spec has already completed working group last call. So, but it's a good question.
Fair enough. I mean, maybe this is something that sits out and sits there in the background as an option for the next variant of the spec if one ever happens.
That was exactly what I was trying to say when I said at such point in time as we depend on packed CBOR or whatever else. So, hold for document update type of response. Yeah. But you're making, I'll think about it some more. I see if I can think of any other things after this, but thank you for raising the question. That's a great point.
In the future discussion of the TEEP protocol, we really need to define concrete to make a decision. Who is the person going to take responsible of dependency resolution? So the agent side or TAM side? And I think today's discussion is going on the agent side is going to take care of the dependency. And then after, yes.
Brendan, do you want to summarize the suit discussion and the suit manifest around dependency resolution? Just
Certainly.
give us a little set.
In the suit manifest, the way the suit manifests work, the only entity that's actually trusted to do dependency resolution is the manifest processor. And that's just because anything else can play nasty games if you have multiple trust domains involved. So if you have to evaluate who is allowed to install a component in positions A, B, and C, then you need to make that determination actually on device. There's nowhere else that can trust it to do that. And so the result of that is that dependency resolution can only be done on device, because only the device can be trusted to determine whether the various signers of the various components actually had the right permissions to be able to do that. So that's the effective result, that when it comes to dependency resolution, the manifest processor looks at what dependencies are required and fetches them as required. Nothing specified as to whether this needs to be depth first or breadth first, but it's probably a depth first search.
So thank you. So in other words, the suit working group, the manifest processor is on the agent side, just to put the two terms together.
And we only have a option for the option 3 and 4. And
well, option 1 and 2 would be possible only with a bunch of extra spec work, and would be harder to do with the normal suit model, right? So
yes.
So that's the interesting thing. That's where bundling comes in the suit manifest. There would be nothing to stop you from producing an additional manifest which bundles a bunch of things together, overrides a couple of locations, and as long as all the permissions work out, it's fine. But it can go in one message.
Okay. I see Soba-san mentioned, so I'd ask why you prefer option number 3 on this slide instead of option number 1. And the answer was, each remove and install results are contained into a single report, which is better. And I'm asking if you can elaborate on in what sense it's better, right? I mentioned why I think number 1 is better in the metric of round trips, for example. But in what metric do you think option number 3 is better? If you can put that in chat or whatever. Because RTT, I don't follow, because option number 1 has a 1 fewer round trip. Option number 3 has 2 round trips. And so option number 3 still has, I'm going to give the analogy here. I don't know, maybe I'll use this one. Got to say, delete, success query response, install. Okay, and so there's 2 round trips, where option number 1 combines these like this one, and so it's install or delete and success. So the equivalent is this one looks more like option 1, this one looks more like option number 3 if I change the labels. And so round trip time would argue for option number 1, I claim. So unless I'm missing something, so. Okay, I just wondering if we want to, okay, here we go. Single report shows the proof of transactional updating process's success. Error message or success message can include more than one suit report. Each, zero or more suit reports, right? Each suit report reports on the success or failure of a particular suit manifest by digest. And so your response can report on any number of successes and any number of failures in the same success or error response. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay, maybe that answers your question. So single report does not mean single TEEP message. It can be 0 or more suit reports per TEEP message. Unless you comment again, I'm going to assume that that answers your question, but if I'm missing something, please feel free to continue. All right. What do people think? Should we go to a different issue for a change?
You should.
Okay.
I only set up the WebEx for 2 hours.
Yeah,
So you've got 45 minutes left.
I said we can either stop now or we can use 45 minutes productively if people are, because if you would have stayed for the whole rat session, then.
Yeah, no, I'm just being cynical because we've spent an hour and 15 minutes on one issue.
Well, I'll tell you,
which is good.
The ones that I picked for the slides were the bigger, hairier issues. We're at the end of the slides. That means comparatively everything else is far more straightforward because I didn't call them out for slides, right? That was very intentional.
Yeah.
And also, most of the other issues is related to 40 and 43.
Yeah,
not directly related, but for the message format relation, yes.
So between yesterday and today, I tried to open some pull requests based on things we talked about yesterday. Would people rather spend time seeing the proposed resolutions that we kind of agreed on, or would people want to spend time picking one of the issues that we haven't discussed yet and start getting into that? So I don't know, Akira, do you have a preference? Or which thing to talk about next? For everybody else, I'll mention the nomenclature that we're using here. Ready to close means it's already in the published internet draft. Have proposed text means it's sitting in a pull request that's not yet merged. And fixed an editor's copy means it's merged in the GitHub copy, the editor's copy, but not in the submitted drafts. And so those are the three labels.
Mm.
So anything that says fixed an editor's copy means we've already merged it. It was on that list of stuff that Akira showed in the group yesterday that says some things have been merged. Have proposed text means that we probably already talked about it, but there's a pull request with text that you may not have seen. And blank ones are ones that haven't been discussed in meetings. So other than it was probably on Akira's slide of hackathon issues. Which is why I'm asking Akira, is there something you think you'd like to talk about? You want to pick one? Other than that, because I can pick one, I picked the previous ones, and so if somebody else has a preference, go ahead and pick one. Otherwise, I'm happy to just arbitrarily pick one, but I'm looking at other implementers to see, is there something else that you consider blocking?
Not really. So.
All right, so how about we start at the top and kind of triage things and at least agree on maybe what the next step is as the action item? Some of these might be easy, some of these might be let's take it to the list or whatever. So I guess I'll just start at the top if that's okay with people.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So who is this one? Is that somebody on the call? I don't know GitHub handle to real name mapping.
He's not in the call, but yeah,
okay.
He's
right.
working with us. Yes.
Okay, so I understand the issue. The question he's raising is today what the draft says is that the suit manifest is embedded. Let's see, where's the example? Is embedded. There's the two examples. Okay. Is embedded directly with CBOR versus embedding it as a B-stir that you didn't have to call another CBOR processor on. Okay. And so whoever filed this says, he would prefer it if it was embedded as a B-stir that you don't actually see the manifest, you just see this blob here, as opposed to today where you paste it into, say, a CBOR decoder and it actually decodes inside the manifest. at least inside the suit envelope, I should say, not the manifest, the suit envelope. So since suit envelope is something that Brendan, you defined, do you have any preference or recommendation for how you expect people to use suit envelope?
So the first thing is that suit envelope is probably, pending the suit meeting, going to be used as a suit envelope tag. As in, we're going to define a CBOR tag for suit envelopes. I think that's an important step here. So if you care that that's there, then maybe that's something that's relevant. Other than that, the next thing you should probably know is that everything inside of the suit envelope is already B-string wrapped. So that may or may not affect your opinion of this. My take on it is that it's easier to set the endpoint of your suit parser to determine whether or not you've got an overflow of an individual object if you know where that object ends.
So is that an argument for, here it's making your point that says the fields inside the envelope are already B-stir encoded here, right? You see this is just a B-stir instead of the actual full, you know, CDDL and stuff. Are you saying that argues for doing B-stir encoding?
What it's saying is that it's not a deep structure if you want to parse the manifest. Yeah. So you don't lose a lot by parsing it. However, that being said, if you want to find endpoints safely, then you probably want to have the end pointer, something that you can actually set. What I will also point out is that you get a little bit more reusability and modularity of code if you do structure things in that way. One of the arguments that I was given for wrapping cozy structures in B strings within the list of cozy structures that we've got was that this was what the cozy libraries actually expected. They wanted a start pointer and an end pointer, and if you didn't have an end pointer, that was difficult to do.
But I was wondering, Brendan, like I didn't quite understood whether you suggested us to use the B-string based wrapper or rather the structure directly. That's what I didn't quite understand.
B-stir comes with the links, and so you know right where the end pointer is in the example that the filer wants us to change to. What we have now looks like this, and when you start the object here, you don't have the pointer. You don't know what the actual size is, and so you say, well, the size of this one is such and such, and the size of this one is such and such, but you can't just jump to the end. So.
And that's relevant for some library implementations. So like this is why I made the point about the cozy objects within suit. It was Kuhn. When Kuhn was looking at this, he said that it was really hard to hand a cozy object to a cozy library if you didn't know what the end pointer for that cozy object was.
Gotcha. All right. So you're saying your recommendation is to go ahead and accept the request and change it as directed here, so it looks like this.
Yeah, it costs you a few bytes, but it makes your software more modular.
Okay. I am convinced by your argument.
And it's more easier to make the examples. Yes, in the TEEP message. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so TEEP side meeting discussion. Yes, let's do this. Okay. Just helping
decreases visibility of structure. So that is the cost. The cost is the decreased visibility. But if you do it in a modular way, as Brendan says, it actually might provide you with a canonical way how to go through the layers here, and then it's not a problem at all.
Okay. So I'm going to go on. 83 we've already talked about, meaning that was part of the slides. 81 was part of the slides we've talked about. This one came up in the hackathon and was already accepted, and so I'm going to skip over it. It meaning accepted by the implementers, and so it's not as interesting to talk about given that all the implementers already agreed, at least the implementers that were at the hackathon agreed, I should say. Basically what this one says is the text was ambiguous in terms of when you need to include the TC list, and the answer is you include it whenever the query request asks for it. Duh. Okay. Okay, so going on to this one. So Akira, do you want to summarize what this one is? I'm going to scan through it here for a second. Ah, okay. So,
Yes. So for me, it wasn't that difficult to understand, but for me, for the just reading the draft, the text, and the person who never attended the IETF discussion, maybe it gets confused. There's two places for signing, and who's going to take who's going to be responsible for the signing? TEEP message itself and the suit manifest. And my understanding is the suit TEEP message itself should be signed by TAM, and suit manifest should be signed by TA signer or TA developer or TC signer. Yes.
Okay. So I think this one is just editorial. There's no technical thing to discuss. It could be that we point back to a particular section of the architecture document, or that we have a one sentence version of each or something to make it more readable. There's no technical question here. Okay.
Yes, because just reading the TEEP message protocol draft, it doesn't say why you need two signers.
Gotcha. Whereas the architecture document does.
Yes.
Okay. 78, you started mentioning at the end of the meeting yesterday, Akira, and that was the one that I asked you which issue number covers it, and you said 78 right before the meeting ended, and so let's just show people what was in here. This is the one that you can see the token is in here, and at the end of the hackathon, we had this meeting about this little field in here. This one was fouled because there was a bug in the spec. You can see here, other integers like data item requested come after options. And then you notice right in here, there's an integer that's not up there that's before options. That's the contradiction in the spec, that the TEEP error does not actually conform to this right here that Akira discovered during the hackathon. So we said, well, how do we fix that? And so one thing we could do is say, this is correct, in which case all we do is we move the error code down. And notice this is a uint versus this one is an int. And so you can see at the end here, I think, Akira, you have a comment here. Okay, this is kind of what we agreed during the hackathon here as the proposal to say, star uint instead of star int, and the error code moves to the end.
Yes.
So this is the proposal from Akira and Asobi-san and myself, and I forget who else was there. So, okay.
Then for the parsing the TEEP message, only expecting the mandatory is the first type entry, and the option is always there. Option could be empty, but it's still OXA0 or OXA something will be expected, and anything else is option. Then,
and you can see the idea was to change it to, and so if token is optional, which we kind of talked about yesterday in the meeting, then if token is there, then it would be inside the options portion, not in the stuff at the end, because it's optional. So there's already a pull request that I have that actually does that, although some of the token question is still open based on the suit meeting. All right.
Just one minor nit, as you provided labels that will not be encoded in any case because it's array, I would also create a label for the last member here that is now asterisk uint.
Let's go back to, yeah, you're right. Error code does have a label here. So
yeah, and also for consistency. I mean, the other two also have.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that was a bug in the, because you can see here. So let me just show where this came from. Because I was not the author of this. I think I helped edit it, and so some errors may be due to me, some may be due to Hana, some may be due to somebody else. But it was, we all know that there was some bugs in there before. But you can see the start in with no label right here. And then if we look in, I think it is the maybe it's not copied into here. I'm just looking to see if the query request is actually copied into this issue, because it's in the query request I'm looking for. There it is. Here. You can see there's no label on the data item requested here.
No, but data item requested is a group name, I assume, and therefore it would maybe be labeled in the group.
I don't know what you mean by a group name. You have to educate me on that.
This is not
it's just
a,
an integer. It's just an
oh,
integer.
this is just an, oh, this is just an, then it's okay. I can't see this because it's not labeled. So yeah, because the first 3 items have labels, I would just be consistent and have this fourth, or 3s and 4s.
Yeah, I don't have it up here. It's that is the production. I've lost the issue that I was in. The production for data item request was something like data item requested equals uint within size 4 or something like that, or size 8, something like that. It's defined as a uint with a maximum size.
Yeah, again, just prefix it with some human readable label, and then it would be consistent.
Yeah, so then it does insert another byte or something into the encoding, but it makes the stuff be more consistent. And so then
no, it is not biting into the encoding, because labels are not conveyed over the wire. They're for human readers of the CDDL here. Type will not be encoded, token will not be encoded, and the to be labeled int, of course, label will not be encoded, of course.
Okay. I thought it was encoded, but so if it's not,
then you want to have a. If you want it to be encoded, make it a map.
Yeah,
and
but
then
we
labels
don't
are
want that.
unique.
We don't want
Okay,
that.
yeah, sorry, you're right. It's encoded if it's curly braces. It's not encoded if it's square braces.
Exactly, but it's for humans, and then you know what it is. You can, if you have a good label, you can remove the comment, and it's self-descriptive.
Okay.
Well,
So
it's not
I
for
think
humans, it's for standards people.
Yeah. So I think
Yes,
there are cases
sorry, I
in the
was
spec
mixing
right
those
now. That tells me. So thank you for pointing that out. I think there's probably some cases in the currently submitted internet draft that define numeric values for some things that are on the left side inside of square brace things that can probably be deleted because they're never conveyed, so the actual numeric value wouldn't matter. So there's probably a couple of unused productions in there we can delete.
Also, you're using the colon notation, which already types these as strings. So you can't retype them by defining type. That would also be an error.
Got you. So there are errors in the CDDL you're pointing out. So
it's only CDDL frosting. It's just some consistency stuff, and this would not validate if you define type again.
So I'm going to see if I can open the actual spec here, because I'm almost certain there's bugs in the CDDL then.
Yeah, I mean, I have to look at it as a whole and make a review in any case at some point. So,
but it's not. I think it doesn't speak in favor of CDDL if so far all the specifications need either you or Carsten to fix them because CDDL is so complicated.
Yeah. So this,
if your perception would be correct, Hannes, I would agree with it.
So this right here is the list of things that I'm saying probably a significant number of these can be deleted here.
Some, I don't know what you did.
Some, because some of these are inside, like this one right here can't be deleted, right?
Yeah, that's a type name.
The ones with the colons, like this. See, component ID is here, and so down here somewhere there's component, like this line right here can be deleted as an example.
Yeah. No, so the ones with the sorry.
No, that can't be deleted.
I didn't see what.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to scroll back up to show where it was in the example.
Give us a map.
I'm looking for it here.
Yeah. So let me hang explain CDDL to you.
No,
stop. No, he's not right. Let me explain this to you. If you're using the colon notation, that's a specialization of the arrow notation. An arrow is prefixed by a type. A colon is prefixed by a string. It's a convenient function for people that come from JSON, because they expect the label to be a string and they use a colon there. So if you're using a colon for a label, it's always a string. If you use an arrow notation, like the X list above, then this is a type and you have to define the type somewhere. With a colon, it's already typed. This is a string.
That repeatedly tripped me up as well. I expected it just to be any arbitrary type that I put in there. It took me a while to get used to it.
Shit, yeah.
It's getting used to,
Brendan.
but it's not complicated.
You're pointing
This is
the
not
intent
what
of
is
this-
typed in the document. In the
this one
RFC.
you can blame me, right? Because I was the one that inserted this type here, and so this is my misunderstanding. I had the same problem that Brendan you just mentioned here. You're telling me that my intent was that I should have. My intent may be wrong, right? But my intent was that this should be, you know, an integer followed by the B-stir, and I should have used an arrow if I actually wanted that. So I don't know if this means that it's an integer or if you said it was a type. I was assuming integer and then a B-stir as back-to-back fields in the map.
If you use the arrow, it becomes a type name. Now component ID is a type name, and you have to say type name rule, also the equal sign integer, and then you define the type.
Okay,
and then
gotcha.
it's here.
Gotcha. So the typo is that colon should be an arrow in this case, and then this production is used.
Yeah, let's use arrow as much as possible.
Yep, I agree.
Just forget that colon exists and everything will be fine.
Yeah, that is exactly what's in the CDDL. It says use the arrow. Instead, if you're coming from JSON, use the string short one. That's basically
so this
what
right here, you're saying this I can treat as being a human comment, right?
Yes.
This is a human comment. This is a human comment. And so that data item requested here is just missing the human comment in front of it.
Exactly, that is what I was saying. And for human comments, I personally, as a style, always use a colon notation because it's shorter and you don't have to define a type for never being used. It's just useless. So in arrays, I typically use the colon notation, and for maps, I use the arrow notation.
Gotcha. Thank you for the explanation. Useful.
Yeah, it's just explaining.
Yeah. So you were saying down here in this, now I'm back in the issue, not in the document, right? You're saying add the human comment on the left side here, you know, a label or something like that, because it doesn't affect anything anyway on the wire. So there's nothing that affects the bytes. It's just saying it's just a documentation clarity issue.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. Gosh, I learned something about CBOR. This has been useful. Okay.
It is very useful.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. I agree. Because you need to have Hank in addition to RFC to actually get it right.
Yep.
I'm still insisting that it's not a coincidence that in all the groups I've been to, everyone always gets it wrong. That can't be a. This is not random.
CBOR is like Kirsten's initials, and so the point is he is the spec, right? You have to go to him.
This is a CDDL thing, not a CBOR thing, unfortunately.
Hank, clearly you did CDDL wrong because CDDL is not your initials.
That's the right. That's the right. Yeah.
That is an inherited problem. CDDL meant something entirely different back in the day, but it was the CBOR definition language first, and it was something else. We didn't start this. We just took it over when it was abandoned.
It's supposed to be HBDL.
There you go, HBDL.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm fine with cuddle.
All right, let's pick another one. A couple of these that are just saying, yeah, we should add examples into the spec. So this is one of the two that's just saying we should add examples into the spec. This one we talked about in slides. This one we talked about in slides. This one we talked about during the meeting. It didn't have a slide other than a curious slide, but it was covered kind of in my token slides. That one was covered in slides. That's the other one that says, let's add an example. Once we have an example of a suit manifest and an example of an EAT, we should add those into this document that says, here's an example EAT that would be usable in the TEEP context. Here's an example suit manifest that would be usable in a TEEP context, just so we have examples. That's on the back burner until the suit manifest, well, until the RATS claims for EAT are there, because you won't see the example until there's something to actually put in there. The suit manifest we could start doing if we constructed a suit manifest for, say, you know, maybe a trust zone or something that has a place to install stuff into. We could do that now. It just hasn't blocked implementers yet. Those are already in the latest spec. Not a big. Now we're getting down to things that might not be a big deal. I could go into 51. 49, so I'm putting 51 in the stack. That will be the one I go into if I don't find something better. 49, we had a slide about, and Lawrence referred to it in the RATS meeting. 44, Hannes, do you remember what? Do you want to cover 44?
Yeah. So when I was working on implementation, I was wondering how to best, and this is utilize X509 certificates in this whole thing. But now, since we pushed a lot of content over to Suit, I think this is more a topic for Suit, because the reference RFC is kind of, at least at that time I need to reread, it's like kind of complicated, but I think this is now more a Suit topic rather than TEEP.
Okay, so do you think we should close this thing and just bring it up in Suit, or do you think that once
I think it should be closed.
Okay, making sure there's nothing we need to do in the spec that's a reference to anything, so, but you're okay just closing it?
Yeah.
Okay. Looking for any other low-hanging fruit here. 43 is what we just spent all that time discussing. Another one with examples. That one overlaps with the other one. There are two that are just optimizations, but are worth discussing at some point. So we could also cover one of those, because optimization is, should we punt it to later, or should we go ahead and cover stuff now? 40 is interesting because this one, before Hannes got on, I alluded to it in one of the slides that I just showed in the long discussion we had for 45 minutes. And this has to do with the token discussion as well. And so there's no new discussion on this one, but it might be worth just me pointing out what 40 is tracking. Okay. Maybe I'll do that just by referring to the slide here where I covered it. It was here. Remember when I talked about this line here that says, is it possible to send something unsolicited if you don't have a token? And so up here, the question is, remember, if you have a 0-byte post, query request comes down, and you send a query response, okay? So the question in option in 40 is it possible to send a query response without having to have the extra round trip to get the query request, okay? Because this was possible in OTRP. Now, let me tie this back to the discussion of the challenge needed in the evidence. If you're going to send evidence, you need to make sure that that evidence is fresh. There are three ways in the RATS architecture to make sure that it's fresh. Nonces, which need a challenge, timestamps, which do not need a challenge, and handles, which do not need a challenge. So if you need a nonce, you have to do the extra round trip, right? That's the actual get the nonce. The only case that that issue number 40 is interesting is in the case where we're using timestamps or handles. Okay, and so that's the scope of what issue 40 is if you're using timestamps or handles, then there's nothing then the question is, can you just jump and send the query response without having the extra round trip? That's what issue 40 is tracking. In other words, if you were to delete the token in here, because the only thing that you have that you need it for right now is to get the token out of the request. If you delete the token, then you don't need it. In the case where you're using handles or timestamps. Any comments on that, now that you understand, hopefully, what issue 40 is tracking?
Looks good to me.
So then, do we have any time left, or are we at the end here? I'm just checking the time. Oh, we still got 15 minutes.
15 minutes left.
Okay, let's go back to 51 since we've never talked about this one before, and only, I think, comments are from Hannes and me in here. So currently, if we look in the TEEP protocol spec, there's the error code space, right? And so if you hit a failure processing something, whether it's a TEEP manifest or just parsing the TEEP message, okay, there's an error code space. Now, in recent pull requests, we've made the change that says anything that would belong in a suit report no longer has a TEEP error code, right? There's just a TEEP error code that says suit manifest processor failed, see the suit report for details. But there's things that are TEEP failures that have error codes. And so that's what's defined, and it defines this. Currently, it has an IANA consideration section that says we propose an IANA registry for the TEEP error codes, and it says that the IANA registry for those error codes is listed as expert review. Right, that's what the spec says right now. It doesn't actually say why you want expert review or why you have things. So I'm raising this as a question. Okay, do we actually want to have vendors that extend error codes and put custom error codes into there? Or do we just say, here's the set of error codes, right? By a perhaps poor analogy, right, just to take an arbitrary other numbering space, right? HTTP has error code spaces, and those ones are extensible, but that one says IETF review, okay? And it's an interesting analogy just because both of them, the error code is not the only thing that you can pass, right? Even if you use a standard error code, I can pass a custom thing in the text string along with it. You can do that in HTTP. You can do that in the TEEP protocol too. So you can already extend stuff by putting stuff in the text string. So the question is, what policy should we have on adding new error codes? Is it like RFC required, in which case maybe you don't need an IANA registry, you just rev the RFC? Is it expert review? Is it IETF review or something else? Okay. And so the question here is, it would be simpler if we didn't have to have IANA involved. Or if we did, then maybe IETF review instead of expert review, because you don't need a designated expert. But since we've never actually talked about this, that's why this issue is here, in case people have views on what direction we should take as far as error code extensibility.
I think we should sort of make it as simple as possible for people to add new stuff. And so I'm more in favor of expert review, like in general, not just for this one, because writing new RFC just to add an error code to me is overly complicated. And most people, like, it's not that we need to prevent random people on the street to register error codes for TEEP.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly about this one, so I'm fine going along if that's what everybody thinks. I'm not going to argue against it, but it seemed like extra complexity without the rationale, so I just wanted us to talk through what the rationale is. Do you think that people will actually extend the error code space?
Well,
among the implementers right now, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, I think they would, but it's a rare occurrence, right?
Nancy, were you saying something?
My audio is cutting out, so I can barely hear you guys.
Did you have an opinion on this, Nancy?
Well, there is a notion of having some extensibility from the error codes perspective, right? I don't know if we need a full IANA registry.
So
the question is,
guess,
can we leave it extensive but not have to go?
Well, so the question I would ask, given that you have the text field, is numeric error codes are interesting. In addition to the text codes, if and only if, I claim, feel free to argue otherwise, I claim if you have code that would pay attention to specific error codes and do something different, right? If it's just for human logging, you're going to use the text string for that, okay? And so if if a vendor or an implementation or a future standard wants to add a new error code, the question is, what would the behavioral change be if it saw that error code? If the TAM saw that error code coming back, what would the TAM do differently? If you can answer that question, then you need a new error code. If you say, I would just log it differently for human statistic gathering, then I would claim that the text message is already sufficient. So my question to Hannes and other implementers is, do you think you would have a need to extend the error code space in a way that the TAM would need to treat it differently, to have different behavior based on seeing that error code in an error message? When I followed this, I couldn't think of anything that the TAM would do differently. If it's an error, it's an error. But I mean, there might be a couple of categories of errors that are already in the spec, but I couldn't think of new categories. So that's why I filed the issue, is to ask this in an actual meeting.
For me, but just the vendor adding any message they would like in the T string should be fine.
Meaning, all you would use it for is logging in human diagnostics and stuff, not
Yes.
for case statements in the TAM.
No, yeah, yes, that's right.
Yeah, I'm happy to have an IANA registry and expert review if we think that your TAM is going to have a case statement, a switch statement with new cases that are going to be added for specific values, and it's going to do something different behaviorally. But I've not heard that argument yet. That's why I'm asking. So I don't know if, Hannes, you have any examples or at least hypotheticals you can come up with?
I have to try. It's a good question. It's a good question. Yeah. Good that you brought this up. Yeah.
Feel free to think about it. You don't have to answer right now, but I won't consider this one closed until we can either agree on what the answer is, and if the answer is yeah, we come up with an answer, and then it's fine as the document has it. But if we can't come up with an answer, then asking IANA to have a designated expert and having IANA review the stuff, it's just more overhead that I don't know if it's actually necessary. So, all right, that's what 51 is.
Yeah, it's a fair question. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to look for anything else, because otherwise, I think the other one's just examples. A request for examples. Anything else here? Nope, those are both ready to close. So I think we're at the bottom. So everything else is just open pull requests ready to be reviewed. I guess by without going through these, just going to repeat question to, I think, Nancy, do you have admin on this repo? I don't know if Nancy can hear me. Right now, whenever I file one of these issues, or whenever I open a pull request here, I add all of the TEEP protocol spec authors other than myself, except for I can't add Akira because I have to keep doing, at Akira, please review and comment because he's not showing up as a contributor. So I need one of the admins to fix that. So, all right. Well, I propose that we end here.
Hey, Dave, I'll fix that.
Okay, thank you, Chiro. Yeah, sorry, I missed the fact that you were on. Yeah, thanks, Chiro. And then I guess my last question to Tiru, which I could follow up over email, but since you're on now, for the architecture document, we were following a process since there was lots of vigorous working group discussion as the architecture that only the chairs were closing issues. Do we need anything that drastic here, or can we just say the authors are welcome to close issues up until we start working group last call? Do you have a preference here?
I think it works for me. Anyway, I've been following with the updates to the architecture document, and I've been closing the issues that have been addressed. So I just thought 2 or 3 new issues that needs to be addressed. Not many are left.
Okay.
So
if you don't mind closing the issues, then we'll just mark them ready to close. If you want to keep doing that for the protocol spec, that's fine. I'm happy to do whichever process the chairs want. So.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Great. That's everything that I think is useful to go through on this call here. So unless Nancy has anything else, I'm going to stop sharing. Artiru.
I'm good.
Okay. Sounds like we can end here. Thanks all for sticking around.
Bye.
Sure.
All right. Goodbye. Good night. Whatever time zone you're in. Good morning. Whatever.
Yeah. I like this.
It's noon.
Yeah. noon.
It's
It's
3,
noon?
3 a.m. Yeah, it's 3 a.m. here.
Oh,
For you,
good.
you look pretty fresh at 3 a.m.
Oh, it's a good thing I have a low-res camera. You can see I don't look fresh at all.
It's 8 p.m. here.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Well,
Good
CPO arrow
good
was
afternoon,
great.
good evening.